And as time moves on, her looks as well, the attention she once received, miserably will vanish and dispel. When there are no more hearts to break, and all the moments flown, when she receives what she has sown, narrow and alone, the last heart she will ever break will be her own. A transformation would show the deceiver inside her, as no victim ever goes back on their word, lies worded so carefully they echo little truths. Just enough for her to accept what she tells herself, as she repeats, "I do this for me." She repeats, and she repeats. But little does she see, everything inside will start to bleed. And as it proceeds, everyone will see when she repeats, "I do this for me." There is no room left for those she needs. Time will pass, and will pass. All things will fade as they have. She lives only for herself, and in the end she will find that is all she has. And when she receives what she has sown, narrow and alone, the last heart she will ever break will be her own. Greetings, friends. And mostly enemies. How's it going, everyone? Been a while since I did anything other than the chapter reads. And I swear, I'm not abandoning this channel. I'm just a busy man. And there's other shit going on in my life. But this is something I've been meaning to get to for a while now. Searching for Marilyn Monroe by Pae Veo. If you don't know who Pae is, he's proudly part of, well, I can't speak for him. I'm proud to have him as part of Team Adventurous. His channel is linked in the featured channel section of this channel, and his channel attention is full of really, really good content, intellectual, engaging content. His channel is better than mine. Go check it out. But today, I'd like to talk a little bit about Pae's work and dig into some stuff in there that I find very interesting. So, let's get into it. I do want to start with a discussion of the titular piece in this collection. This isn't one collected story. There's many short stories and parables, as well as stuff that kind of defies any classical categorization in here. But the titular story, a story searching for Marilyn Monroe, called Searching for Marilyn Monroe, is a story about a man, a writer, because writers writing about writers. And in this story, this man finds a sense of purpose when he gets this idea and starts writing what he thinks is going to be the next great American novel. And he has this as a central motivating factor, a linchpin in his mindset for a couple of years. He's in the military when we're introduced to him, and he goes home and he's struggling with his job at a university, and then he loses that job, and the entire time this novel that he's written is the linchpin in his psychology, until it finally gets to the point where no one's accepting it, and he's being turned down so much that he feels completely beaten down by life, and he kills himself. And while there's a lot of ways you could look at the story, there are a few things in it that merit specific discussion. For one, I think that the way the story is titled is fairly interesting. The title, Searching for Marilyn Monroe, is a symbolic title of the man searching for a better time in his life. He talks a lot about how Marilyn Monroe is this symbol for him of his childhood, a time when things were simpler, better. It's a symbol of nostalgia of the good old days for him. And so he's always searching for Marilyn Monroe. You know, it's a metaphor. And he never finds it. And finally, he decides to kill himself because no one's accepted his novel and he can't find Marilyn. And, you know, he just gives up. The story feels like a story of predestination in some ways to me. And that's a message I firmly disagree with. You know, there's a lot of details in the story that if the character had changed, you know, if he'd been willing to alter his novel, if he kept submitting it to publishers, if he'd done this or that or the other, he might not have gone down the psychological spiral that led him to taking his own life. And so the whole thing has this very bitter flavor of existential nihilism. But spoiler alert for anyone who goes and finds themselves a copy of this book, the entire book is dripping with existential nihilism. So be aware of that. Now, moving on. It wouldn't be something that Pae wrote if there wasn't some very strange shit in here. Stuff that I just can't fully put my finger on, to be quite honest. You know, once upon a time, I'm going to admit I was a little bit arrogant or prideful, and before I really got to know Pae, I thought maybe I was a little smarter than Pae. And after reading this, I think it's exactly the opposite. I don't think he's leagues ahead of me or anything, but I'm comfortable admitting that I think Pae is smarter than me. And there's a story in here, all thumbs or on second thought, about this guy. Well, it's actually about two guys. The POV changes very shortly into the story. We got this guy. I'm looking at my notes here. We start with Jordan improve in an elevator. And then only about a page and a half into the story, the POV switches to a man by the name of Jason improve. And the entire story is structured in a very... what's the word I'm looking for here? Silence you. Structured in a way that makes the story feel like not much time is passing, despite the fact that it's described as taking place over a period of months. And over the period of months, we see Jason improve, go on this little mental journey where he starts only going with his second thought. Like, every decision he makes is the decision he would have made after his first decision. But then he starts way overthinking that, and he goes on a little head trip about, well, if it's my second decision, then it's my first, and you know, that kind of thing. And he goes nuts over it. The whole thing reeks of a character very seriously wrapped inside mental illness. However, that's only the surface of the story. And because of the aspects of mental illness we see, and some of the things that exist inside the story, I kind of feel like Jason and Jordan improve might be the same person. But again, the mental illness aspect is only the surface of the story. You see, there's a lot of specific mentions of numbers in this story. 4 dogs, 2 Mr. Improves. We get 2 strangers in 2 different elevator scenes. We have 6 sections in the story where we're given specific numbers of specific actions. And I ran through the numbers on some of these and if you used numbers inside the story, eventually you could reduce everything to 2. Doing some crazy, whether it was adding this to this or taking that from that, you could always reduce everything to 2. Very much like the stuff you see in that movie, The Number 23, with Jim Carrey, that kind of shit. And the whole thing makes me feel like there might be some kind of code hidden in the story. And if there is a code hidden in this story, I report to you honestly and humbly that I'm smart enough to realize it's there, but not smart enough to figure it out. Now, moving on past some of the very strange and kind of quirky stuff that I couldn't really figure out, like the last story. There's another story called The Song of Erebus. For those of you who don't know, Erebus means a place of darkness. It's a rough translation. And this story is about a man, and I have my suspicions about who the man really is. Sitting under a tree with a bottle of booze and some tobacco, and he's just planning on getting drunk and intoxicated and fading off to sleep and waking up the next morning begging for enough money to get another bottle and doing it all again. Except tonight, a man wanders underneath the same tree, and he's riddled with pock marks. His flesh is rotting off. The guy's described as being just destroyed by disease and drugs. And it's made clear that he's dying. And we get this conversation between the narrator, who we started with sitting under this tree, and this man who walked up. And the entire thing is a discussion on the futility of persisting, the futility of remembering, and yet the importance of it at the same time. And the nature of those two things in conflict with each other. And again, it's just a circle jerk discussion on the topic of existential nihilism. Is it really worth it to exist? What is the nature and meaning of existence? All that stuff. And it's very well done and heartbreaking. The quality of writing in The Song of Erebus in this book, that's one of the short stories in the book. It's captivating. Of all the stuff in there, it's one of the things that hit me the hardest. And it really gives you a lot of points to think on when it comes to what is the point of life and why are we here. And it does it in very articulate ways that many people might not think about. And it says it very artfully. Much like the section that I started this video with, which is from a different story. It's put very poetically. And it just leaves you with that dark cloud hanging over you. Like I said, a lot of the stuff in the book is that way. Another story that I feel merits mention is a story in here that's called 53. And what 53 is a meta-analysis on the art of writing, creative writing. The character 53 is literally the number 53. And the story, through the way it's narrated by the narrator and the way the narrator interacts directly with both 53 and the audience, it's made very clear very quickly that this is a meta-analysis of creative writing, where we see the narrator do things to 53 to highlight kind of, in some ways, the absurdity of the craft of storytelling. Pae forces us to take a look at the nature of writing fiction. We're forced to realize that everything that happens in every fictional book to every fictional character is exactly that. It's fiction. The author dreamed it up. Anything could have happened. The author could have done this or that. They could take away or give. And we as authors and readers have to keep that in mind, that anything is possible. And everything we do to our characters, and everything that we choose not to do to our characters, is a reflection of us in some way. I kind of feel like a pseudo-intellectual quoting Rick and Morty of all things, but there really is truly a great line from that cartoon that an alien says, and he says, "All writing is autobiographical, in my opinion." That's not an exact quote, but that's the takeaway. And I actually fundamentally agree with that. And if that first comes from somewhere else, I apologize. That's where I heard it. And 53 falls right in line with that very same idea, in my opinion. Because we see this dialogue take place between the titular character 53 and Pae, the writer. And we are painfully reminded of the fact that everything we do in our writing is a reflection of us. I know that I'm repeating myself a little bit, but it's kind of hard to talk about these stories in any depth without repeating yourself a little bit, because many of the stories in here are several pages long, but what they're doing is just beating an idea over the head. And I'm not saying that in a bad way. It's actually done very articulately and thoughtfully, and it kind of pokes and prods the idea from every direction. And I'm sure that there's some ways that I haven't thought about all of the stories I've mentioned so far that would be a different way to analyze it, a different message to take away. These are the things that I took away. Overall, I would say that if you're a serious reader, if you like thought-provoking stuff, and if you don't mind feeling a little bit of existential dread, try to find yourself a copy of this. I just so happened to, search and found a used book website, and I can only say that this is by sheer, what's the word I'm looking for here? Providence, that the copy I randomly purchased off of some random thrift store website had a signed copy. And I report to you honestly that this is one of my prized possessions. I will hold on to this greedily until the day I die, and I will tell my firstborn son that if he ever parts with it, I will haunt him. So, I'm going to close this out with an official invitation to Pae to come on my channel, or I'll go over to his, and I would love to have a discussion about the book and some of the stuff in it. I might even do a second read through just to refresh it all in my head. And if he's not interested in doing that, I do still want to tell all of you that if you can get your hands on a copy, you should. There's some very thought-provoking stuff in there. And if you can't find yourself a copy of that, good news, Pae is about to drop another novel, and I'm very excited to see it. I'm very excited to find out what it's about, find out how to get my hands on a signed copy. Hint, hint, Pae. And in the meantime, I just want to say, again, I am so proud that I can count Pae among, I consider him a very good friend. And I'd hope he counts me the same. Alrighty, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this discussion of Pae's work. Again, if you didn't know who Pae was before this video, please go check his channel out. It's very good. I've referenced his channel before here on my channel because he deserves it. Alright, everyone. Thanks for being here. Welcome to Garden.